Greetings, public health family. Welcome to Operational Tattoo Inspection Training. The purpose of this video presentation is to qualify you to perform pre-operational and routine inspections of tattoo operations on Air Force installations. My name is Senior Master Sergeant Sonia Berry, proud 4E for 25 years. I'm super excited to be a part of this training. Did you know that 62% of males and 34% of females in the military have tattoos? And because of your efforts, tattoo studios on military installations provide our service members and families a professional environment to get tattoos by enforcing the most stringent health and safety standards. This instructional PowerPoint presentation is only part of the training process. It's a good idea to schedule a walkthrough of a tattoo studio in order to obtain hands-on training. In addition, it's advisable to have a copy of the Interim Body Art Standards and Inspection Guide, a copy of DAFE 48117, Public Facility Sanitation, and a copy of Tattoo Business Inspection Checklist on hand to follow along during this presentation. This is a fairly long presentation with a lot of information. I encourage you to take 10-minute breaks every 45 minutes or whenever necessary, as well as to pause for further discussion among your team whenever the need arises. All right, let's get started. The purpose of this training is to provide customers, whether it's active duty, dependent, or retirees, access to a highly in-demand service on the installation in a professional, safe, and sanitary environment. This training was developed to prepare public health personnel to inspect tattoo businesses that are operated on Air Force installations. There are 6 objectives for this training. To introduce the Interim Body Art Standards and Inspection Guide. This document outlines the how. The Army Public Health Center developed this document training in November of 2021, and the Air Force adopted it shortly after. Identify essential collaborations that should occur with the local health department off base. Identify key requirements for approving a tattoo business to operate on the installation. Review the public health standards for the tattoo facility, tattoo artists, and the sanitary controls for a tattoo business. Provide an orientation to the tattoo business inspection checklist and associated inspection procedures, and to review required distribution of the inspection reports. The regulation that gives Air Force Public Health authority to inspect tattoo operations is DAFE 48117, Public Facility Sanitation. The Army Interim Body Art Standards and Inspection Guide will be used to provide the necessary regulatory oversight of tattoo businesses. The Interim Body Art Standard is based off the National Environmental Health Association's 2019 Body Art Model Code, adapted to meet Air Force specific restrictions and procedures. The NEHA Model Code is just a guide to assist local health departments develop their inspection criteria because there is no federal governance or oversight. Along those same lines, not all states use the same standard, and some don't regulate body art activity at all. Therefore, providing the service on an installation with oversight is the best thing for our community. The content and layout are as follows, and don't worry, we'll review this in greater details throughout this presentation. This is just an overview. Prohibited body art services, requirements for approval of a tattoo business to operate on the installation, requirements for design, layout, and furnishings for the physical facility, requirements for an individual to perform body art services, administrative requirements for managing the day-to-day operations, employee health and hygiene controls, sanitation controls, required controls associated with the body art procedure itself, required controls for managing regulated medical waste and hazardous waste, and requirements for preparing Air Force personnel to inspect tattoo businesses and procedures for managing tattoo business inspections. Throughout this training and in the interim standard document and inspection checklist, you will see items marked with an asterisk. Let's take a closer look. Please follow along in your interim standard so that you can see what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it. So I'm just going to tell you an example of what this asterisk means and where its placement is. So the asterisk is a critical item. So if you look at paragraph 5, the asterisk is at the end of the header. I'll give you a minute to look for it. Therefore, the entire paragraph is critical. Everything that falls in paragraph 5 is considered a critical item. Now let's take a look at another example. If you look at paragraph 11a, the asterisk is at the end of the sub-paragraph. Therefore, just that sub-paragraph is critical. Alright, so notice the asterisk in the header. So what does that mean again? I'll pause so you can answer. Bingo, you got it right. Everything following that header is a critical item. If I were there, I'd give you all a piece of candy, but unfortunately I am not. Okay, so prohibited services. The interim body art standard was deliberately titled as the body art standard rather than tattoo standard to address the wide range of services within this industry. Body art is simply the temporary or permanent modification or application of an artistic expression to the human body. Body art services include piercing, tattooing, scarification, branding, and etching, semi-permanent applications onto the skin such as henna. It also provides physical modifications such as tongue splitting, unnatural teeth shaping, reshaping the ears to create points, and even implants on the head or forehead that resemble horns. Now, don't get any ideas. The prohibited body art services identified in paragraph 5 of the interim body art standard are based on 3 key factors. First, AAFES 362903, which addresses the wear and appearance of Air Force uniforms, strictly prohibits airmen from any type of body modification as listed on this slide and further prohibits body piercings other than the fleshy part of the earlobe. Therefore, none of these practices will be allowed on the installation, regardless if it doesn't apply to dependents and other authorized beneficiaries. Sorry, I know you're excited to get a tongue split. Second, the practice of henna is also not authorized because of the tremendous risk associated with the use of alterated ink. Henna is coloring that is naturally made with a plant and usually seen in a color range from orange, red, burgundy, brown, or coffee. This plant material is approved by the Food and Drug Administration for application as a hair coloring and is not approved for application directly onto the skin. An allergic reaction to henna can cause tightness of the chest, itching, and wheezing. Greater risk, however, comes from the toxic ingredients that are commonly used to darken the henna. The third factor is based on the limitations of the concessionaire contract, which only allows the business to provide tattooing services. The concessionaire contract further prohibits certain types and placement of tattoos on the body according to AAFES 362903, regardless if the customer is the military member, a beneficiary, or other civilian. For example, tattoos that depict indecent, sexist, extremist, or racist images are prohibited. Alright, so that was a lot of information. Hang in there with me. The takeaway is that tattoo studios on military installations will only do tattoos, no piercings, body or ear. While service members are allowed certain ear piercings, tattoo studios on the base are not set up for piercing activities. Artist-only tattoo areas is authorized in AAFES 362903 for all customers, whether active duty or not. Cool? Alright, now let's take a look at the physical requirements of the facility. So you might notice on this slide there's no words. So I did that on purpose. I wanted to give this chance for you to follow along in your interim body art standards so you can start to become familiar with it. So we're looking at facility requirements. Those are outlined in paragraph 7 of the interim body art standards. So if you'd like to follow along, please turn to paragraph 7 now. Also, I want to point out that there is an inspection checklist embedded in the interim body art standards that you will use when we perform the inspections. It's called the U.S. Army Tattoo Business Inspection Checklist. I apologize, it says Army, but we are going to use it all the same. So again, it's embedded in the interim body art standards. It is Appendix A, which starts on page 33. So if you need to pause the training and make a copy for everyone in the room, I recommend it so you can follow along using the checklist as well. And that pertains to the entire training. It might be a good idea to do. Now, not everything that I'm talking about is going to go in perfect order of the checklist. So you might have to kind of navigate it as we go through, but it should be pretty close to following along. So I'm going to go through this. Again, I'm only going to hit some highlights. You can follow along in paragraph 7, talking about facility requirements. So you can kind of study the pictures as we talk about the things that I'm pointing out. So the tattoo facility needs to be operated in a facility that is separate from all other types of services, such as food activities and beauty parlors. Sleeping or living spaces must not be accessible through the tattoo facility. If the facility has an employee break room or office, it must be separated by walls and a door. The floors, walls, and ceiling must be light colored and smooth for easy cleaning. Wall-to-wall carpeting is not authorized in any area, but entrance mat or rug is allowed. And you will see from the picture on the right-hand side, kind of where that doorway is, the reception area is on the other side of that. So the procedure area is its own area. There must be a clear delineation of the procedure area from other activities such as client waiting area and instrument cleaning area. So I jumped ahead. But there's the procedural area. Notice again, the wall separates it from the reception area and any of the storage areas. So these photos are actually two different American Tattoo Society studios. They capture the procedure area. On the other side of the wall is the waiting room. I keep repeating myself. Each procedure area must have at least 80 square feet of floor space. So this is one criteria where the Air Force standard is likely to be different from the local health department, which typically only requires between 35 square feet to 60 square feet per procedure area. So be mindful when you discuss with your local health department. Standard might be different. The most stringent standard applies, which is ours in most cases, which is a requirement for 80 square feet. All furnishings, such as the artist's chair, client table or chair, and storage cabinet must be smooth and non-porous. The procedure area in the photo are open bays, which means there's all of the procedure beds, tables rather, are in one big open space as opposed to like cubicle private spaces. This might be different from what you see in your facilities. So in a situation like this with the open bay, the facility must provide a privacy screen. So it's available to shield the client upon request if they would like to have some privacy. Probably hard to see, but there's an actual folded privacy in the upper hand right corner, propped on the wall of the picture to your left. It's just kind of like a black square back there, so they did have them available upon request. There must be a dedicated hand washing sink, and it must be located within the procedure area, and it must be in line of sight to the artist and unobstructed. The artist should be able to walk directly to the hand washing station without opening doors, without having any obstructions to wash their hands. As you can see in the picture to your right, the hand washing sink is right there in the middle of the procedure area, so all the tattoos can easily access it without having to open a door or anything of the sort. So they must have a storage closet provided for their brooms, mops, and buckets. Although the tattoo studio may use a custodial sink that is located in close proximity within the building, but outside the studio, it may use the cleaning equipment. It may not use the cleaning equipment. So let me break that down. So a lot of the tattoo studios you're going to see are in the space with the BX. So if that's the case, the tattoo studio can use the custodial sink that the BX uses, but they have to have their own cleaning equipment like their brooms and such. They can't share with the BX. So all waste receptacles must be covered and hands-free. Separate receptacles are required in each procedure area. There must be one at each hand washing station and in each restroom. Each receptacle must be appropriate for the type of waste being managed. So those of you with a keen eye will notice that these waste baskets are not hands-free. So yep, you are correct. That is a write-up. And this picture was taken early on the operation and has since been identified and fixed, but it's a good example to see if anyone gives someone a high five in the room if they noticed. All right. So mechanical ventilation must be sufficient to keep the facility reasonably free from odors and noxious substances. So this might be a situation where you might want to get bioenvironmental health engineering involved. Hot water must be supplied to all sinks and have a minimum temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, for those of you who use Celsius overseas, 43.3 degrees Celsius. Additionally, all hand washing sinks must be hands-free with a sensor or knee or foot pedal, or they must have the blade-style faucet handles. So I really want to highlight that the best way to make sure the facility requirements are met is to review the blueprints before the build-out. So we're going to touch on this later more deeply, but I also want to point out the person in the wall in the mirror to the left. That's me. Probably can't see me. I'm very small. Anyways, not important. Okay, so we've covered facility requirements. It's time to transition. So we just finished talking about facility parameters, which was paragraph 7. Now we're going to take a look at body artist requirements. So if you're following along in your interim standard, that is paragraph 8. Also starts on page 8. So these are requirements for an individual to administer a tattoo. So each tattoo artist must be licensed artist. They must be a licensed artist. They must be licensed from the locality where the tattoo business is operated. So this might be the state, city, or county health department. And that is for you to do research to see who does licensing in your locality. So if there's a locality where neither of those, state, city, or county, issue artist licenses, then the military will not operate in that area. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure that artist licenses are being prescribed in your locality. Also, a body artist might have a license from a different state. That does not apply. It can only be for the area where they are performing that tattoo at your installation. So again, not all states issue tattoo artist licenses. Many, especially foreign countries. So this is one of the reasons why tattoo businesses are currently not being authorized at military installations in foreign countries. So there's also rotating artists. So the duration of these rotations can vary and could be as little as 1 week or as long as 45 to 60 days. It's important. Before a guest artist can begin providing services on base, they must be licensed or receive a temporary permit through the local health department within the state where the military installation is located, even if they're licensed in another state. Some more requirements: all artists must be at least 18 years old. All tattoo business employees, regardless if full-time, part-time, or a guest artist, must have a record of training on file. and we'll go into more details, but this must include bloodborne pathogen training, hazardous communication, first aid, and CPR. I also recommend reviewing only records of those on site, meaning they have to keep records for a certain amount of time, and we'll go into more detail about that. But I would only concern myself with reviewing the records of the tattoo artist who's actively working at your facility at the time of the inspection. Alright, so body art artist requirements also include that each artist review all applicable SOPs, standards of operation procedures, and have documentation when that review was conducted. So we're going to go into more detail about which SOPs are required later on in this training. Okay, so we just reviewed body art requirements as outlined in paragraph 8 to include licensing, records, and training requirements. Some key details to remember are that a tattoo business can only be operated or approved to operate on an installation if the local authority, whether it's city, county, or state, provide artist licensing. We do not provide licensing, and I'll tell you it again. Public health, military public health, does not provide licensing. Alright, so now let's take a close look at administrative requirements. All of the administrative requirements are outlined in paragraph 9. The next few slides will identify the information that must be readily available to the public, the types of standard operating procedures that must be in place, information that must be provided in the employee and client records, requirements for reporting adverse reactions attributed to the tattoo procedure, and general management of the operational files. So public notification includes prominently displaying the business name, operating hours, the owner's name, and contact information in the facility. The business license and license for each of the tattoo artists must also be posted where they can clearly be viewed in the customer waiting area. Contact information for the local health department where the business license was issued, and the contact information for the installation public health authority must also prominently be displayed in the customer waiting area. Education information that must be made available to customers include the types of health risks commonly associated with a tattoo procedure. Aftercare activities that the client should practice to prevent infection of the tattoo site. It's important to note that the medical treatment facility on base is under no obligation to treat clients who experience an adverse effect from a tattoo unless they are an actual beneficiary of the military healthcare system. Right, so public must also have access to a printed copy of the interim body art standards. It should be maintained on the premises and made available to customers upon demand. A notice must be prominently posted to inform customers of their right to view the controls required by the Air Force to ensure safe and sanitary tattoo business practices. So we're still looking at administrative requirements, public notification. This slide demonstrates some of the required public display items that are to include handouts for aftercare instructions, signage that informs customers that they will not tattoo outside of service dress and appearance standards, contact information to the local health department, and a 24-hour aftercare hotline. Now, let's take a look at standard operating procedure requirements. Okay, so we're still looking at administrative requirements. So we're still in paragraph 9, but now we're going to look at standard operating procedure requirements. So those are specifically outlined in paragraph 9b. So there are 6 standard operating procedures that the tattoo business is required to develop for their operation, is laid out in paragraph 9. These SOPs must be readily available in a hard copy for employees to use. So first, they have to have an exposure control plan or infection prevention and control plan that outlines procedures to eliminate or minimize personal exposure to blood as required by OSHA. The SOP should address hepatitis B vaccination. Employees can decline Hep B, but declination must be on record. Employee health and conditions in which a sick employee should not come to work, hand hygiene practices and glove use, and adherence to proper facility cleaning and disinfection practices and needle stick protocol. The next SOP is for regulated medical waste. Disposal and treatment of regulated medical waste, or RMW, is the sole responsibility of the tattoo business owner. The tattoo business must contract with a registered regulated medical waste transporter and regulated medical waste treatment facility, and must include the contractor's business name, contract information, and state registration number in the SOP. The SOP must provide a description of the red medical waste training provided to employees and detailed procedures for how waste will be segregated, handled, labeled, packaged, and stored until disposed. RMW transport and treatment details must also be included in the SOP. The tattoo business is required to create and maintain an RMW management log. This log must capture the date the regulated waste was generated, the type of container, for example, a sharps container or a red bag for non-sharps, the amount of disposed, such as the number of containers or the overall weight, pickup date, and transporter tracking number. Okay, so we're still talking about administrative requirements, standard operating procedures, specifically the regulated medical waste. We are going to jump ahead a little bit in the interim body art standards to go into more depth about the regulated medical waste. So if you're following along, please go to paragraph 13 of the interim body art standards, which outlines how to manage regulated medical waste. So regulated medical waste is always segregated at the point of generation, which is the procedure area. The majority of RMW will be sharps containers. Non-sharp regulated medical waste consists of blood-saturated items which do not commonly occur during tattoo procedures. So I really want to emphasize this point. So the tattoo facilities are required to have what's called a red bag. So the red bag would be where you would dispose of a blood-saturated item. But typically you don't see these with tattoos because people don't bleed that much with tattoos. You'd see it more like with piercings and whatnot. But either way, they will have the red bags at each procedure area, as well as a sharps container. So the sharps containers for the tattoo needles. So in case you didn't know, the tattoo needles that are standard now, and they will be the only ones you'll see in our facilities on the installations, are disposable. So when they're done with the tattoo procedure, they have to get rid of it, which will be in a sharps container. So red bags and sharp container. When non-sharp red medical waste is generated, it must be placed in a waste receptacle lined with a red bag. Each procedure area must have this. Non-sharps waste container must remain closed, and the bags must be removed and replaced when they are full or before they begin to develop odors. So again, they need to stay sealed and removed from the procedure area when they're full or begin to smell. Typically, you're not going to see these bags get full. Sharps containers must be sealed when they are 3/4 full or have reached the fill line if indicated on the container. So the sharps container is going to be at the procedure area. Once it's 3/4 full, it must be sealed, and then the artist will have a holding area for these items until the contractor comes to pick them up. Maximum on-site storage of RMW may not exceed 30 days. So regardless if it's still in the procedure area or if it's still in the holding area, it cannot be on the facility grounds to exceed 30 days. That max retention period may be less in some states, so the more restrictive standard must be applied. So again, this is a conversation to have with the local health department. For sharps containers, the clock starts when the container is sealed at the point of generation. So once you seal a sharps container, you have 30 days from that point to have it removed from the premises. So you must, not you, but sorry, the artist must mark once that is sealed with the day and the date that it needs to be removed from the facility. For red bags, the time starts when the first non-sharps item is placed in the bag. So if there, for some reason, is a blood saturated gauze that's thrown into the red bag, that red bag needs to be thrown out 30 days from that point. So again, it must be date marked somehow, or the artist must somehow be able to answer to you if you ask, how long has this been here? So you know it's not been there longer than 30 days. So whatever system works, you need to look into that, how they're doing that. So again, they should have it's called tracking, right? So they have to have some kind of tracking mechanism in order to know how long it's been on the premises. So they can date the containers, or they can keep a disposal log that shows the date when the RMW is removed from the premises and taken to the treatment facility. Let's break regulated medical waste down even more. First thing I want to highlight is the medical group is not involved. The tattoo business must contract out. So let's take a look at these pictures. So the one on the left-hand side, in the upper left-hand side, you see the white box, that's the sharps container, and then right below that is the red bag container. Notice the red bag container has lid. Each procedure area is required to have both the sharps container and a red bag waste basket with a plastic red bag inside. So all the needles that are used in a tattoo facility on an installation are disposable. So they're thrown out between each patron into the sharps container. Again, the red bag is for those items saturated in blood, and again, not likely to occur during a tattoo procedure. Picture on the right is a larger RMW bin for the sharps containers when they get full, and red bags to be stored until they're picked up by the contractor. So remember from previous slide, the regulated medical waste can only be on site as specified. So the sharps container. A sharps container is required to be sealed when it's 3/4 full. It's sealed, dated, and placed in storage. It must be removed from the facility at least 30 days from when the sharps container was sealed. The red bags have to be removed from the premise 30 days from when the first item was thrown into the bag. So there needs to be documentation available to indicate when an item was thrown into the bag. This also needs to be covered how this tracking is being done in the SOP. All right, now let's take a look at hazardous waste management SOP requirements. Okay, so we're still looking at administrative requirements, specifically SOPs. Again, those are in paragraph 9 of the interim body art standards. So we just talked about regulated medical waste SOP requirements. Now let's transition and look at hazardous waste management. This SOP is separate from the RMW. The tattoo business owner must collaborate with the installation environmental office or bioenvironmental health to help identify any hazardous wastes to ensure compliance with state and local regulations. The SOP must identify all of the different hazardous wastes that are generated by the tattoo business and provide specific procedures for how that waste will be handled and segregated from regular trash, stored, and transported when removed from the premises. One thing to note is tattoo businesses do not produce any out-of-the-ordinary hazardous waste. Right, another SOP requirement is instrument cleaning and sterilization if applicable. So, sterilization is not applicable. I just want to highlight that anything used that requires sterilization in the tattoo facility comes pre-sterilized and packaged. So there will be no sterilization on the premises. An instrument cleaning and sterilization SOP is required to address management of reusable implements if applicable, which it is not. This SOP is required even if the tattoo business only purchases pre-sterilized items because work surfaces and tattoo machines will need to be cleaned and disinfected. The SOP must address the specific cleaning and disinfecting materials used, how used tattoo implements will be managed between uses, the step-by-step processes that will be used to clean and disinfect, and storage of disinfected and sterilized equipment to prevent contamination. We will review the required steps of the cleaning process later in this training. So, the interim body art standards and the checklist are both going to allude to a spore testing SOP. Spore testing is only conducted when there is sterilization on site. Again, there will be no sterilization on site. Cleaning and disinfecting, yes, anything that requires sterilization will be done off-site and pre-packaged. The last and final SOP requirement is for injury or adverse event reporting procedures. The tattoo artist is required to report any adverse reactions that occur during the tattoo procedure and any illness or infection that the client experiences after the procedure. Adverse events are reported within 3 business days to the installation public health authority and within whatever the prescribed time frame is required by the local health department. The SOP should identify the types of reactions or symptoms that are reportable, the client information, artist information, and materials that were used during the procedure, and all the necessary details for submitting reports such as the department contact, phone number, email, and/or fax number. Adverse reactions involving FDA-regulated products and tattoo inks that are manufactured in the U.S. must also be reported online through the FDA MedWatch Adverse Reporting Program. A link to the website is provided in the Interim Body Art Standard. Remember, the contents of the SOP are outlined in paragraph 9B of the Interim Body Art Standards. I do want to point out that the checklist that we spoke of earlier does have the SOPs on there, but it merely mentions them. It doesn't break down everything that's required to be in the SOP. So I highly recommend that the inspector use the Interim Body Art Standard when examining the SOPs to make sure that it has everything that is required. You could even ask the facility to email you their SOPs so that you can look at them within your office and spend more time with them, at least initially, and occasionally checking to see if anything's changed, and if anything has changed, did they update the SOP applicably. Alright, so now let's take a look at employee record requirements. Alright, let's take a look at employee records. This is outlined in paragraph 9C, page 12 of the Interim Body Art Standard. It outlines the required information that must be retained in the employee file. This applies to permanent and guest artists. Information includes the employee's legal name as shown on their driver's license or other government-issued identification, and a photocopy of the identification card must be kept on file. Military ID cards should not be photocopied. Guest artists who do not live in the local area must provide the temporary address where they are staying and their permanent address, which should be on their driver's license. This is for traceability in the event of a situation after the guest artist is no longer at the facility. During an inspection, review the date of birth and the employee records to ensure compliance with minimum age requirement for body artists, which is 18. Appropriate training documentation, as discussed on slide 9, must be available in the employee file. This includes a signed statement indicating the employee has read and understands the requirements outlined in the interim body art standard. A record of hepatitis B vaccination status is required. If the individual cannot take the vaccine due to a medical condition, a letter from a medical practitioner must be included in the employee file. Also, if the employee declines the vaccine, then they must sign a Hep B declination form according to OSHA, which must be retained in the employee file. Okay, so how long do we keep the records on file? All records must remain on file for 3 years. They also must be safeguarded for PII and HIPAA. So remember, there's traveling artists, and they may not be a permanent part of the staff. They could come do a tattoo for a week, and then they may never come back to the facility. Regardless of how long the artist worked in the facility, their file must be maintained for 3 years. So keep in mind, when you are looking at employee records, if you pull a file from an artist who worked in the facility 2 years ago, hasn't worked in the facility since, their stuff might not be completely up to date. So I would say it's best to just look at the employee records of the employees that are currently in the facility. That way you can make sure that those records are up to date. Okay, these are the requirements for employees. Now let's take a look at record requirements for the tattoo clients themselves. Requirements for the client records are outlined in paragraph 9D. There are 2 key documents that must be retained in a client record: the consent and release document and the procedure record. The client consent form must be available either in a hard copy or a digital file. The consent package contains the client's legal name as shown on their government-issued identification, their current address and phone number. A copy of their government-issued ID must be retained on file, and inspectors should review those files to make sure clients under the age of 18 are not being tattooed. Keep in mind, some states allow parental consent for children under the age of 18, but the Air Force standard requires the client to be 18 and does not allow an exception with parental consent. Other contents of the consent package must include a description of the potential hazards or health effects that could result from a procedure and a client health evaluation. Required questions that must be included in the health evaluation are outlined in subparagraph 9D1B of the interim body art standard. So again, make sure that you're using the standard when you're looking at the client records, because the checklist doesn't break it down. Aftercare instructions must also be included as part of the client record. The consent and release document is complete when the client signs a statement indicating they have read and understand the health risks and aftercare instructions. The procedure record indicates the date of the procedure and the body artist who performed the procedure. It includes a description of the tattoo image, a list of all inks that were used to include brand, color, lot number, and expiration dates, and a list of tattoo implements used to include the brands, batch, or lot numbers and expiration dates for each sterile item. If the inks, dyes, or pigments were modified in any way, a full description must be included in the procedure record. This includes the water that was used to dilute the inks. If multiple appointments are needed to complete a tattoo, each procedure day and associated materials are documented in the client's record. Any injury or adverse health effect resulting from the procedure are also annotated in the procedure record. As you can imagine, client records can add up. You might want to consider inspecting a sample size or schedule a time separate from the walk-in to sit down to look through them thoroughly. Be sure to have the interim body art standards with you for reference. The tattoo business inspection checklist, again, doesn't have all the necessary details that you're going to want to take a look at. And again, what's the why of the client records? Well, in case there's an adverse event, we can look back and pinpoint any of the materials that were used in case there needs to be a recall, or if there was a recall, those sorts of things. Employee and client records contain personal identifiable information and protected health information. Therefore, they are required, according to HIPAA privacy rules, to be securely stored and have controlled access. These records must be readily available for review during an inspection. All administrative records must be retained for at least 3 years. These include the employee and client records, purchase documents for all pre-sterilized items, disposable logs for regulated medical waste and hazardous waste as applicable, and the regulated medical waste treatment record invoice received from the treatment facility. Safety data sheets are required for all chemicals and detergents used on the premises. When a specific product is no longer used, a copy of the SDS must be retained on file for at least 1 year. Phew, that was a lot of administrative requirements. Remember, Chapter 9 addresses all of these, so you don't have to memorize them, at least not until after the test. Just kidding, there's no test, but maybe there should be. As we transition from talking about administrative requirements to sanitation controls, let's go take a look at our checklist. These items are on page 3. Also, if you're following along in your interim body art standards, sanitation controls are outlined in paragraph 11. Sanitation controls apply to all aspects of the operation, such as the tools and supplies used to administer a tattoo, the equipment used for cleaning tattoo instruments, and the furnishing and floors within the physical facility. The requirements address when to clean, and how to minimize the potential for contamination. These requirements are organized into 5 categories. Tattoo instruments and tools, which include requirements for sterilization, cleaning and disinfection, body art supplies, single-use items that are mandatory for use and proper management of those supplies, and last, the physical facility. Before we look at how to manage tattoo instruments, we need to become more familiar with the different components, such as grips and disposable cartridges, the needle and tube setup, and the needle cartridges. I want to reiterate, the key here to remember when we're talking about sterilization is that all components that require sterilization are single-use only, meaning the component will be thrown away after each patron. Therefore, the tattoo studio will not be sterilizing anything on the premise. Items come pre-sterilized, so please keep this in mind throughout this discussion. Here are the components of the tattoo machine. The left-hand picture is a cordless rotary-style tattoo machine. It must be covered with a plastic sleeve like you see in the picture. The sleeve is single-use only, and the machine must be disinfected between patrons. We will talk about disinfectants later in this presentation. The second picture from the left is a disposable grip with tube that houses the needle and inserts into the machine. It is to be discarded in regular trash after each patron. The third picture from the left is a disposable tube that houses the needle. It is to be discarded in the trash after each patron. The fourth picture is the needle cartridge and needle rod. These are both disposable, single-use only between each patron and must be discarded in the sharps container after use. Clear as mud, right? Hopefully you will have the opportunity to be better acquainted with these components when you do a tattoo studio walkthrough. Just a reminder that needles are single use and must be discarded in the sharps container. This slide provides a quick summary for the required disposition of tattoo implements after use on a client. Most tattoo machines cannot be sterilized because the motor cannot be separated from the machine, and some of the parts are not tolerant to high heat associated with sterilization processes. A plastic sleeve is placed over the tattoo machine to protect it during a procedure. After use with a single client, the plastic sleeve is removed and the machine must be wiped clean and disinfected before it can be reused. This chart has reusable components that require sterilization. These are not authorized to be used on a military installation. Instead, disposable grips with tubes and plastic disposable tips must be purchased pre-sterilized and are then discarded as regular trash immediately after use with a single client. Cartridge needles are purchased pre-sterilized and are discarded in a regulated medical waste sharps container. Stainless steel needle rods must also be purchased pre-sterilized by a commercial supplier and then disposed in a sharps container. As I have stated several times now, there's no sterilization on the premise. All sterilized components are pre-sterilized and packaged items purchased pre-sterilized must be stored in their original unopened sterile packaging. The storage location must be a clean drawer, cabinet, or closed container that is used exclusively for storing sterile items. Sterilized items must not be used past the expiration date. And again, these have expiration dates, so be sure that you're looking for that. Sterilized items must also not be used if the sterile packaging has been compromised in any way, such as being punctured or becoming unsealed. Okay, we just discussed sterile items. Now let's look at cleaning and disinfecting, which is still outlined in Chapter 11. All surfaces within the tattoo facility are required to be non-porous and smooth to allow proper cleaning and disinfection. For padded surfaces of tables and chairs, that means no excessively worn surfaces or tears. Patching a torn cushion with tape is not acceptable. All disinfectants used in the tattoo establishment must be approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as a tuberculocidal disinfectant. These are identified on the EPA's List B. A simple Google search will help you find those. If chlorine solutions are prepared on the premises for cleaning the floors and restrooms, then a minimum disinfecting concentration of 500 parts per million must be used. The tattoo business must also have chlorine test strips readily available to ensure that they are preparing the bleach solution at the proper concentration. All surfaces of the procedure area, such as the tattoo workstation, the client's table or chair, and the body artist's chair, must be cleaned and disinfected immediately before and after a procedure. Alright, let's take a look at management of sanitation controls for body art supplies. First thing I want to highlight is stypic pencils are not authorized for use to stop the flow of blood. A sterile gauze should be applied. Antimicrobial products applied to skin must be approved by the FDA for application to the skin. There are no FDA-approved inks. Tattoo artists have a responsibility to report adverse reactions attributed to inks and to monitor the FDA website for safety recalls involving tattoo inks. Water is needed during a procedure to dilute the ink, rinse or wipe the procedure area, and to rinse needles during a procedure. This water must be sterile or distilled water. Absolutely no tap water should be used for these tasks, as this increases the potential for microbial contamination. The water is typically poured into a squirt bottle, as shown in the image to the left, and also poured into a cup for dipping needles. Green soap is an antimicrobial solution specifically formulated to clean the skin and keep it moist during the tattoo procedure. This soap is purchased as a concentrated product that must be diluted with distilled or sterile water before use. Inks are purchased sterile and only a portion is dispensed into a single-use cap for the procedure. Any remaining ink in the cap and the cap itself is discarded after use on a single client. It's important to note that the squirt bottles containing the green soap and distilled or sterile water are covered in plastic to minimize contamination. This plastic is discarded after a procedure. So again, I want to reiterate that ink is not approved by the FDA, so please make note to inquire about FDA monitoring during your inspection. Also, this is precisely why the tattoo studio must keep good records on the inks used for each client. Let's talk about body art supplies that are required to be single-use. Essentially, anything applied to the skin. Razors must be disposable type. Metal safety razors with removable blades are not authorized. All tattoo needles must be discarded after use with a single client. Surface barriers such as plastic wrap, hospital chucks, and tape wrapped around the tattoo machine grip are all removed and discarded after use with a single client. Latex gloves are not authorized for use for tattoo businesses primarily because of the risk for allergic reaction. Reusable cloths and sponges for wiping surfaces are prohibited. Only disposable paper towels for disinfecting wipes should be used for cleaning surfaces. The sanitation controls associated with the physical facility are very similar to what we expect at all inspected facilities. Floors, walls, and ceiling must be maintained in good repair with no gaps around doors, holes in the walls, or broken or missing floor tiles. The facility must remain free from pests such as flies, cockroaches, and rodents, and except for service animals as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Acts, no animals are permitted in a tattoo establishment. A fish tank is allowed but may not contain reptiles or other types of critters. Absolutely no eating or tobacco products, including vaping, is permitted inside the establishment. The tattoo artist may keep a bottle of water or other beverages in an office if it is completely separated by a door from other areas of the operation. Clients may not bring any beverages into the procedure area. All waste receptacles must be emptied frequently to prevent overflow and development of odors. The plastic liner must be replaced each time a waste receptacle is emptied. Floors, walls, and horizontal surfaces of cabinets, shelves, and window ledges must be cleaned frequently to prevent any visible accumulation of dust or debris. Floors are expected to be swept and mopped daily. The inside of the storage cabinets and drawers must also be free from visible debris. Miscellaneous items such as cleaning compounds, administrative supplies, or personal items must not be stored in the same cabinet or drawer or on the same shelf where body art supplies are stored. Wall-mounted soap and paper towel dispensers must remain adequately supplied so they don't risk running out in the middle of a tattoo procedure. If disposable hand soap bottles are used in the facility, they must be discarded when empty. They should never be refilled or have water added to the soap to extend its use. That concludes our review of necessary sanitation controls. Preventing a tattoo from becoming infected relies on 3 key elements: hygienic practices of the tattoo artist, the sanitary controls of the tattoo operation, and the client's adherence to aftercare instructions for keeping the tattoo clean until it has healed. Essential controls for employee health and hygiene are outlined in paragraph 10 of the Interim Body Art Standard and page 2 of the checklist. This is an area where hopefully you'll be able to observe a tattoo procedure to observe these practices. Employees should not come to work if they are sick and must not administer tattoos if they have an open or unhealed wound that cannot be covered with a bandage. Employees must not have any skin infections. Employees with wet draining lesions on the hands or face must obtain a clearance from a healthcare professional indicating they are free from infection. If tuberculosis is a concern in certain localities, the Installation Medical Authority can require a tattoo employee to have TB testing prior to starting work. Keep in mind that not all employees are artists. Not all of these standards will apply to someone doing administrative duties only. Employees must wear clean clothing. Fingernails must be kept trim and smooth, not extending more than 1/8 inch past the tip of the finger. Additionally, the tattoo artist must not have false nails, fingernail extenders, nail ornaments, or chipped or peeling nail coatings. Each of these conditions make it difficult to properly wash the hands and increases the potential for tearing the gloves during the procedure. The required procedure that tattoo artists must follow when washing their hands include removing all jewelry from the hands and wrist, and then thoroughly scrubbing their hands for 20 seconds with a soap solution. During this time, the artist must ensure they scrub palm to palm, the tops of the hands, between each finger, around the nail and cuticles, and up the wrist to the forearm. Application of hand sanitizer is allowed after the hands are properly washed, but at no time may a hand sanitizer be used in place of proper hand washing. Only designating hand washing sinks may be used to wash hands. Woohoo! You've now completed part 1 of this training. As a recap, here's what we covered. Prohibited body art practices, requirements for the physical facility, requirements for the tattoo artists, administrative controls such as client records, standard operating procedures, and record keeping, sanitation controls associated with tattoo instruments, supplies in the physical facility, and controls associated with performing a tattoo procedure. Now, let's transition and talk about the approval process. Doing great so far. Stay with me. This slide summarizes the timeline and key activities from the initial notification through the target start date of the tattoo business on base. As you can see, as soon as the installation public health authority receives a notification of the intent to operate a tattoo business, they should begin their collaborations with the local health department off base and begin training their inspection personnel if they haven't already done so. This is also the time where the interim body art standards should be crosswalked against the local tattoo standards to identify requirements that are more stringent and also requirements that are unique to the Air Force, which will need to be communicated to the business owner. So there's a lot going on in this slide, so let's break it down a little bit more. Essentially, both the installation commander and public health are notified of intent to open a tattoo studio. Ideally, this should occur 120 days from the planned date of opening. During this time, public health should review blueprints and compare to the facility requirements outlined in the interim body art standards, obtain just-in-time training, and work with the local health authority to crosswalk these standards with the interim body art standards. The pre-operational inspection should occur 14 days before opening. The facility cannot open without this pre-operational inspection. Previously, we stated that the tattoo studio must obtain a business license in order to provide tattoo services on the installation. Paragraph 6B of the interim body art standard addresses this requirement and states that the tattoo owner must obtain a tattoo establishment license from the local health department. We, as the military public health, do not issue licenses, and we expect all businesses and associated operators to be appropriately licensed according to local health codes. The Air Force requirement states that the tattoo business owner must be licensed from the locality in which they will be operating, and that this license must occur through the state or, in most cases, through the city or county health department. A business license is not the same as an artist license. The business license registers the facility at a specific location and provides assurance that the physical facility conforms to body art facility design standards. The body art license ensures that the licensed individual meets the essential training criteria to safely practice their trade. Tattooing is a significantly under-regulated industry. In the United States, regulatory requirements vary widely from state to state and from one health department to the next. Tattoo inks are also not regulated. There are no FDA-approved inks, and there are also no controls regarding the type of ingredients used to manufacture tattoo inks. Tattoo businesses outside of the U.S. have even less regulatory authority. Korea only allows a licensed medical doctor to administer tattoos. Therefore, most tattoos are performed illegally underground. controls in Japan and Europe are both lacking, and current literature available online indicate that there are no licensing requirements for tattoo artists, and there are no systems in place to ensure safe inks are available for use. For this reason, the interim body art standard has prohibited tattoo businesses from operating on Air Force installations located in foreign countries at this time. The business license must be for the physical location where the tattoo business will be operated. Temporary and mobile tattoo studios are not authorized. The term of the business license is determined by the issuing health department and must be renewed according to the date specified by that the health department established. A tattoo business may not continue to operate on the military installation if the business license has expired. Business licenses are not transferable. If the business owner changes or the location of the physical facility changes, a new license is required. Remember, the business license only means the proposed tattoo establishment has met state or local health department requirements, which may not necessarily meet the DoD requirements. However, any shortfalls were already identified by the Installation Public Health Authority and resolved during the plan review process. The pre-operational inspection is intended to verify that all the facility administrative requirements identified in the interim body standard have been met. Additionally, the pre-operational inspection should occur at least 14 days prior to the scheduled facility opening. This will allow the business owner to make any necessary changes if non-conformances to the interim standard are identified. It is the tattoo business owner's responsibility to contact the Installation Public Health Authority to schedule the pre-operational inspection. Tattoo business may not operate before a pre-operational inspection has been conducted and the facility is fully compliant, meaning there are no unresolved violations. Any violation found during the pre-operational inspection must be corrected at the time of the inspection. Items evaluated during the pre-operational inspection are discussed in more detail later in this training. Although not a requirement, the Installation Public Health Authority should request a representative from the local health department to participate in the pre-operational inspection. The health department representative serves in a consulting role. Pre-operational inspections are documented using the U.S. Army Tattoo Business Inspection Checklist provided at Appendix A of the interim standard. So the same checklist that we've been utilizing all along. An orientation to the checklist is provided, a more in-depth orientation of the checklist is provided later in this training. Congrats! So now we've completed part 1 and part 2 of this training. So now let's discuss procedures to actually conduct the inspection. And I hope you're remembering to take notes and jot down any questions that you have along the way, and so we can schedule a call at some point to discuss further. So just a friendly reminder, jot down your questions. All right, let's take a look at the inspection procedures. This slide shows the training strategy that is recommended to prepare public health personnel for conducting tattoo business inspections. Inspectors should receive this training before conducting an inspection. Ideally, trainers should participate in at least 2 tattoo facility inspections. Now, this is just a suggestion. Other than receiving this mandatory training, it's up to flight leadership to come up with further training plans. During the first inspection, the military representative observes the inspection process and the interactions between the health department representative and the inspected tattoo facility manager. During the second training inspection, the roles are somewhat reversed, where the military member takes a more active or lead role and receives feedback and guidance from the local health inspector throughout the inspection process. This joint inspection relationship should continue as long as necessary and feasible until the military inspector feels confident in their ability to conduct a good inspection and properly address non-conformance to prescribed standards. By the way, we are now looking at paragraph 14 of the interim body art standard. So now we're looking at inspection procedures, which is specifically on paragraph 14C on page 26. So let's look at inspection procedures as outlined by the body art standard. Routine inspections must be conducted on a monthly basis for at least the first year of operation. As the tattoo inspection program becomes more mature and the standards are formally published, a risk assessment can be applied to determine if less frequent inspections are appropriate. Routine inspections are always unannounced and are conducted during the normal business hours of the tattoo facility. The inspector should always review the most recent inspection report before they begin the inspection so they are aware of any issues previously identified that may require greater scrutiny. Always keep a copy of the last inspection report with you during the inspection. This is important to easily identify repeat findings. When you enter the tattoo business, ask to speak with the manager. The manager or their designated representative must accompany you during the entire inspection. You should never walk through the facility on your own. Be sure to wash your hands before you begin the inspection process. If a client is in the process of getting a tattoo, or if there's a client scheduled to get a tattoo later that day, the inspector should take the time to observe the procedure. This is an essential part of the inspection that should be observed whenever possible. The inspection process includes walking through the operation, making observations, reviewing records, and having an open dialogue with the manager or tattoo artists, and then completing the inspection report. While the inspection should be unannounced, it might be a good idea to set up a time with the manager if you're going to spend a good amount of time looking at records and SOPs. You could probably even request the manager email the SOPs to you if you need to spend more time reviewing them. And again, remember when reviewing records and SOPs, not to rely solely on your checklist, but to bump up the requirements of the interim body art standard as well. Let's talk inspection scoring and follow-up. The scoring criteria is provided on the last page of the inspection checklist. Pay close attention because this differs a bit from other inspections we conduct. All violations are expected to be corrected at the time of the inspection, but some may require a little more time to resolve. Critical violations that cannot be immediately corrected must have an action applied at the time of inspection to mitigate the risk potential. All non-critical violations that were not corrected at the time of the inspection must be fully resolved within 10 calendar days. The inspector should collaborate with the manager to determine a reasonable amount of time to resolve the non-conforming condition and mark the date in the comment section under the checklist item where the violation occurred. An informal follow-up visit is conducted on the agreed-upon date. The inspector uses the original inspection checklist that documented the violation and enters the date when the follow-up occurred in the comment section with a note indicating what action was taken to resolve the condition. If any violations remain uncorrected at the time of the follow-up visit, a second follow-up may be scheduled as appropriate within the next 10 calendar days. The date of the follow-up is recorded in the comments section similar to the first follow-up. If, after the second follow-up, any violation remains uncorrected, then the inspector must mark the repeat box for that item. If a critical violation occurred and no action was taken to mitigate the risk, then a non-compliant inspection rating is awarded and the facility must have a complete re-inspection conducted within 24 hours or the first business day following the inspection. The scheduled re-inspection date must be entered on page 1 of the checklist. When a non-compliant inspection rating is awarded, the inspector must determine if a recommendation to close the facility is appropriate until the critical condition is resolved or mitigated. The facility must not be allowed to practice if there's an imminent health hazard. This slide provides examples of inspection findings that should be considered for recommending a facility closure. First is when a facility receives an overall inspection rating of non-compliant due to an imminent health hazard that cannot be mitigated at the time of the inspection. An imminent health hazard is defined in the glossary of the interim standard as a significant threat or danger to health that is considered to exist when there is evidence sufficient to show that a product, practice, circumstance, or event creates a situation that requires immediate correction. Also, if the tattoo studio has 2 non-compliant inspection ratings within the last 4 routine inspections, you should recommend temporary closure of the facility as a means of resolving the problems that continue to contribute to the non-compliant rating. Situations such as this suggests that employees are poorly trained or the SOPs are inadequate. A temporary closure allows the facility to address the contractual agreements with the tattoo business owner and also allows time to improve SOPs and conduct employee training. Other conditions that could justify recommending closure include situations when the business license or artist license is expired or has been suspended by the local health department. Remember, the inspector cannot close the tattoo facility. The public health or preventive medicine department head should be notified immediately when any of these conditions exist. Most local health departments will not allow a tattoo business to operate if the business license has expired or if the body artist license has expired. Some local health departments may also impose penalties or suspend a business license if the establishment has multiple non-compliant inspection ratings. If the installation public health authority agrees that the facility should be closed until the violation is resolved, then the garrison commander and possibly the senior commander will need to be contacted to call for immediate closure of the facility. The installation exchange general manager or FSS manager should also be notified if a recommendation to close the tattoo studio is being recommended. Sharing inspection reports and maintaining a good collaborative relationship with the local health department will help to ensure the installation public health authority is informed by the health department when penalties are imposed and when a business or artist license has been suspended or revoked. Okay, so before we talk about the report distribution, I would like to talk about the inspection checklist a little bit more in depth. So hopefully you have a copy in front of you. If you do not, I recommend you hit pause and print one out. So a lot of this checklist isn't really a whole lot different than the ones that we use to inspect our other facilities. It's fairly intuitive, so I'm just going to point out a few things. So the first page under the pre-operational inspection items, notice this first, well, you can't see it, so just the first page is used for the pre-operational inspection. You can go through the checklist during the pre-operational inspection to look for administrative requirements and other things that are in play. But since the facility is not open yet, not all of these things are going to apply. So just use your best judgment. For instance, they should have their SOPs established, right? However, they're probably not going to, you're probably not going to be able to watch them do a tattoo, so you may not be able to inspect for their sanitation controls. So when you're conducting your routine inspection, which is the monthly inspection that you need to conduct, you don't use this first page. So notice on there where it says pre-operational inspection items and there's an NA. So for your routine inspections, you just check NA and then you use the rest of the inspection form. So you should be pretty acquainted with it because you followed along during the training presentation. Again, this matches up with the interim body art standards, which is really nice. So at page 2, you've got administrative requirements. Again, I just want to reiterate, when you're going over the administrative requirements, the checklist is kind of vague. There might be more details about those items that you should know. So when you're looking at administrative items, I think it's best to have the interim body art standards with you. For instance, the SOPs on here basically just is asking, do they have them or not? You need to look further into it, at least occasionally and initially. Not only do they have them, but do they have all the contents that the interim body art standards say that they should have? The next section is employee health and hygiene. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. It's pretty self-explanatory. On the third page, we've got sanitation controls. Again, there's nothing here that I want to point out that's unique. Starting in the bottom of page 3 and then going into page 4, we've got sterilization and sterile items. So this is where you have to really pay attention, because some of these questions are going to refer to sterilization processes. So you remember, we don't do sterilization on the premise, so those items would be NA. So let me see if I can find one really quick. So item 35, so again, we're looking at sterilization and sterile items. Number 35, it says weekly spore testing conducted, independent lab analysis, proper remediation for positive results. Okay, so that's not NA, because we don't do spore testing, because we don't do sterilization on the premises. Same thing for 36, not applicable. Number 7, implement sterilize on premises. Not applicable. All right, so especially for sterilization, be sure to look at it closely and make sure that it's applicable. Remember, all items are pre-sterilized, so that's what you want to concentrate on. Big things are the items should have an expiration date, and the packages should not be torn or compromised in any way. So those are the big things that you're going to look at for that. And then you, on page 4, body art procedure, it gives you an option here to say whether or not you were able to observe. So if you weren't able to observe, then you say no, and then you don't have to score any of those items. Regulated waste management and hazardous management are addressed on page 4. These, just make sure you're asking a lot of questions and look thoroughly into it. And I think when you talk to the local health department, it's a good idea to have a real thorough conversation with how their policies are in regards to regulated medical waste. This is one area where you just really need to go in depth. And of course, you can always contact AAFES Public Health if you have any questions regarding that. And then on page 5, in the back of the form, you've got the customer information and records information. So back in the front, there's the key that indicates what these, what C and NC, COS, and R mean. So there's a legend: compliant, non-compliant, corrected on the spot, and repeat findings. And then on the back, there's the scoring criteria on the bottom, similar to what we see on our food inspection forms. So the only thing, if you remember, just earlier on, I think it was the previous slide, if you do find an item that can't be corrected on the spot, as long as it's not an imminent health hazard, you will do a reinspection, but it's considered an informal reinspection within 10 days. So when you do that, you take this original inspection report with you, and then if it's corrected in that 10 days during that informal, then under the comments section under that item is when you're going to put, okay, now it's been corrected and these are the actions that were taken. So I think that's it for the form. Again, we're here if you have any questions. The interim body art standards talks about this and lays it out, so I know y'all got this. But all right, so anyways, now let's talk about the report distribution. The original inspection report is always retained by the inspecting office, and only a copy is provided to the inspected tattoo business manager. Further distribution of inspection reports should always follow local reporting guidelines. In addition to that, however, a scanned copy of the report must be sent via email to my office, some AAFES, as well as the AAFES Health Services Program Coordinator and the Chief of Community Health Programs at AFMERA. So in case that got confusing, you send it to my office, and you send it to Chief Wigington's office, or the Chief of Community Health Programs at AFMERA. You can always call me if you have questions about that. If the inspected facility has any critical violations, a courtesy copy of the report should also be sent to the installation commander or a designated representative in the local health department, regardless of if these violations were corrected or mitigated at the time of the inspection. These individuals should also receive a copy of the inspection report if a pattern of chronic or repeat violations exist. Chronic repeat violations are defined as having 3 inspections within the past 5 inspections that had the same type of violation. So again, these are some extra measures that we're not used to, and they're unique to this operation. So just make sure that you're paying extra close attention to this in the interim body art standards. All right, that's it. We made it to the end of the operational tattoo inspection training. Congrats! Woohoo! I did want to just re-emphasize something that I talked about earlier. So there's 2 types of violations. There's a critical and non-critical. So I just want to rehash this. If it's a critical item that is found to not be corrected on the spot, it's an automatic non-compliant and needs to be re-inspected within 24 hours. If it is a non-critical item that's not corrected on the spot, that's when the 10-day rule applies. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't confuse anybody with that. With that being said, thank you so much for sitting through this training session. Again, I'm a firm believer that we're doing the right thing for our community to make sure that they're getting tattoos in the most safe environment possible. So thank you for being a part of that. And so now I'm assuming that you have a studio opening on your base, and that's why you're looking at this training. Maybe not. But if that is the case, the next step for this training is once the build out and the facility is ready to go, you should schedule with me a time to walk through the tattoo facility, and hopefully that'll reinforce all these things that we talked about. And some people are very visual and it's a lot of death by PowerPoint. I understand that. So that's really critical to the success of this training. So with that being said, that's all I've got. I've enjoyed my short time with you, and happy inspecting.